have 경찰청 출판사, and the opposition team, we have 장관학교 왔어. So that being said, without further ado, I'd now like to invite the Prime Minister to the podium.
Madam Speaker, we agree upon the principle that the Olympics is about peace. That's what they're going to say, obviously, because that's the only argument that they have under their side of the House. However, the question of the debate is not whether or upon the Olympics actually promotes peace, but the type of peace and the methods on how we promote it is of utmost importance. We think that under our side of the House, peace can be better characterized under the idea that you don't always have to compete with each other. It's rather saying that despite the fact that you two are enemies, despite the fact that you might be at war with each other, we are still capable of cooperating to the extent in where we compete in an international arena for a peaceful purpose. That is what we are going to propose under our side of the House. But the problem with the Unified Olympics team is that this entire process of you acknowledging us as enemies, or the process of how you created the Unified team was problematic, and that is something that we deeply regret. There are two burdens that opposition side needs to prove in today's debate. The first burden is that while the Olympics might be about peace, they must be able to prove upon why this unified team is going to guarantee good relations with South Korea and North Korea. There were so many attempts within status quo in past Korean history and where attempted, or it might have looked like good peaceful methods was going to exist, but it actually turned out to be a bigger worse consequence. So that's the first burden. But second of all, there's something that they also need to understand is that despite the fact that these types of benefits might exist, why does it have to be limited to the women's unified Olympics hockey team? Because what you need to acknowledge within status quo is that all other types of sports genres, there is no unified team. It is only existent within the Olympics unified hockey team. That is a burden that they must be able to prove. Our burden in today's debate is very simple. We think that the entire democratic process of how you created the unified team was very undemocratic to begin with. It is extremely undemocratic. But second of all, we also believe that it's going to harm international relations on how we deal with North Korea, because the entire process of peace has to deal with the nuclear issues that they are conducting, and we think that this is problematic. This motion, the entire process actually harms it. Before I go on,
if you think it's undemocratic for us to create a team, what happens to your refugee team where it was also artificially created for the same purpose?
If you're talking about the refugee team, or what you need to understand was that there was clear distinction. The process of how you created the ice hockey team occurred within the past month, Mr. Speaker. But the entire process of the refugee team was, first of all, for different purposes to begin with, but second of all, we also think that the process was more lengthy. So the very existence of you trying to discuss with the players was actually prevalent under this particular situation. Let's go on to the first argument upon why the creation process was extremely undemocratic. The very simple reason upon why it was undemocratic was because it was a unilateral decision that did not include the voices of the coach and did not include the voices of the players. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, regardless of the sports context, the very fact that the state is making a decision for you, despite the fact that that decision might be counterproductive to what your goals might be, is fundamentally undemocratic because the entire process is unaccountable. But we think that especially in the process of the unified team or the Korean Olympics team, that was even more problematic. Discussion is obviously necessary because there has to be goals that we need to compromise. In other words, to what extent are we willing to promote peace at the expense of the results that is going to come out with the Korean unified team? Because something that you need to recognize, Madam Speaker, is that North Korea really sucks when it comes to ice hockey. We beat them 3-0 on multiple occasions. But additionally, they're ranked lower compared to us. We're ranked 22nd, they're ranked 27th. And we even beat the ice hockey team of France, which is a higher ranking compared to us. We beat France 3-1 in status quo, which means that under the coach of Sarah Murray, we had a very great possibility to achieve achieve good results within the Olympics, but the question is not whether or upon we should achieve these results, what are we willing to sacrifice at the expense of this? But Madam Speaker, what you need to understand is that the moment in where North Korea joins our team is the point in where we have to increase the capacity of our size, and ice hockey is extremely sensitive to the amount of players that you have, because it is extremely energy consuming, and you have to change players every single time. The entire 4 years of how we created cooperation was necessary, but all of a sudden 13 people additionally added within the last month compromises a great deal, which actually compromises the goals that these individuals had to begin with. So because you sacrifice the entire discussion process in you creating that team, this also compromises Sarah Murray, because she learned about the unified team when she just came into Incheon and conducted it through an interview. The players were also non-existent within the process because it was a unilateral decision at the end of the day. So Mr. Speaker, because under our side of the house, the decision was too quick and it was undemocratic, and because it doesn't necessarily have any beneficial result, because the result that came out a week ago, we lost to Sweden 3-1. It was a very one-sided game within ice hockey. We think that because that process was non-existent, we think that this decision was extremely undemocratic, and regardless of what type of peace it might promote, it is something to regret on a basic democratic principle level. Let's move on to our second substantive, upon why it weakens international coalition in general. Mr. Speaker and Madam Individuals, for those of you who didn't go to the military, which is the entire opposition team, by the way, North Korea is very famous. North Korea is extremely famous for their tactics of two faces. So in other words, when North Korea says that they're going to cooperate, the very thing that they do next is they actually attack us. This was very prevalent within the split family reunions. After the split family reunions, it led to the first Yeonpyeong battle. After we conducted the World Cup, where we had cooperation with North Korea, that led to the second Yeonpyeong battle, which resulted in multiple casualties under our side of the house. The conclusion of this line of analysis is that whatever benefit that might be perceived throughout this cooperation is never guaranteed, because North Korea has been using this tactic for multiple years, for the past 30 to 40 years. Every single time it has led to casualties under our side of the house. So therefore, because these benefits are not necessarily guaranteed, now the question becomes, what are we sacrificing for non-existent benefits? And there are multiple things that we are sacrificing in the process of international relations. Primarily the coalition that existed that wanted to actually increase sanctions against North Korea. Even in status quo, China was willing to increase the amount of sanctions despite the fact that North Korea's only ally within the status quo is practically China. So we think that under this process, the moment in where South Korea is sending a message that we are willing to actually impose and embrace North Korea, despite the fact that the international society was willing to go against North Korea, not only decreases the credibility or out of order, not only decreases the credibility of South Korea when they are creating international agreements, because unified consensus is extremely important with the status quo. But second of all, we also think that this is problematic because we are actually funding the entire North Korean team. The entire process of North Korea coming into South Korea is being funded by us. Why are we subsidizing North Korea despite the fact that they have not changed a single instance in status quo? They didn't change their nuclear programs. They're not changing humanitarian conditions that are provided to individual people. Despite the fact they are not changing the fundamental problems that creates North Korea into our prime enemy, we are subsidizing it, Madam Speaker. This sends out a contradictory message that is extremely harmful for further international cooperation that exists within South Korea, and as proud South Korean citizens, we are very happy to propose.
Thank you for the speech. I would like to invite the Leader of Opposition to the podium.